Welcome to EWTN News live coverage of Pope Francis in Cuba. I'm Raymond Arroyo. We're delighted to be back with you again. In a few moments, we'll bring you Pope Francis's visit to the shrine of Our Lady of Charity, El Cobre, with his bishops from the region. Joining me for our continuing coverage are members of the Papal Posse, Robert Royal, editor-in-chief of thecatholicthing.org, and Father Gerald Murray of the Archdiocese of New York, as well as Father Roberto Cid, the director of Radio Paz in the Archdiocese of Miami. If you have questions or comments, you can reach us at papalvisit@ewtn.com or on Twitter. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. I'll be tweeting throughout the event. In a moment, we will take you to Santiago, where the Pope, he recently flew from the site where he had the Mass today. He blessed the city earlier this morning, and now he just arrived at Santiago not long ago, met with his bishops, and now he'll be going to the Cobre Shrine. This is, of course, a central devotion for the Cuban people. Father Cid, tell us how where its origins, the origins of the Our Lady of Charity devotion, and then what it means to the Cuban people.
Well, in 1612, the image of Our Lady of Charity was found on the Bay of Nipe. In the midst of a storm, the image was found. And ever since then, it has been venerated by Cubans. It played a very important role in the formation of Cuban nationhood and statehood. The Mambises, who were the Cuban fighters for freedom, had a very, very strong devotion to her, so much so that they asked Pope Benedict the 15th, 100 years ago, to proclaim her the patrons of Cuba. And she's a symbol of Cubanhood, if I may use that word. And I would add that it's the only one that has not been tainted by the regime. And
by the Castro regime.
Yes, yeah. And it's also a bond of communion between Cubans on the island and outside the island. In preparation for the 400th anniversary, there was a campaign both in Miami and on the island with processions, pilgrimages to El Cobre. And this motto was coined, La caridad nos une. Charity unites us, which is also a play on words, because it's the virtue of charity, of course, but Our Lady of Charity that brings Cubans together.
And the origins of this statue, this figure that was floating in the Bay of Nipe, it has its origins in Toledo, Spain.
The province of Toledo.
Yeah, and I thought that's an interesting connection given the history of Cuba as well.
Yes, well, it combines the various elements, the Spanish colonial heritage. This image was found floating in the water by two Indians and a black slave. So it shows those races coming together. And what unites all of them is this devotion to the Mother of God, who points them to Christ, and that's exactly what the image shows. It's a fascinating aspect of Spanish Catholicism, meaning Spanish from Spain, that the devotion of the Virgin Mary is so important. And for our sort of, let's say, North American sentiment, when we see this beautifully robed statue and it's all the devotion to it, it's a reminder that Spanish Catholicism has this great emotional attachment to the Mother of God, which really surpasses kind of a rationalistic faith that sometimes we tend to fall into here in the United States. Religion should be an expression of the whole person.
Not unlike what we saw earlier today. The Pope went to a hilltop. There was a cross overlooking the site of his previous Mass, and he was there all day. We see the Pope invoking another touchstone that runs to the very heart of the culture and the history of a people. Talk to us a little bit about that and the vehicle that the Pope is choosing in this moment.
Well, look, we know from past experience from Argentina that he rejected liberation theology on the one hand, and as we hear now, he's also rejected what he calls neoliberalism.
Pope Francis.
Pope Francis, in favor of the Teología del Pueblo, the theology of the people. And by that, what he means is a popular Catholicism, one where there are lots of saints. He used to send out, when he was the the head of the Jesuits in Argentina, he used to send out his seminarians to actually go out with the people and touch statues, and the Jesuits say, no, we're intellectuals. We don't do that sort of thing. No, this is what really the people want. They don't want Marxist revolution. They have this very concrete, very passionate, emotional attachment to the person of God, of Jesus, and the person of Our Lady, and of the saints, etc. So this is really his wheelhouse. This is Francis at his
and all the popes, Benedict, John Paul II, they all invoked the protection of El Cobre, of Our Lady of Charity. Each of them recalled this deep history, and you could see the way this resonated, even though you have a population where only 5%, generously 5% of the Catholics are practicing. So this is much, I guess the easiest way to compare it would be to Our Lady of Guadalupe, where you have people, Hispanics who don't even practice the faith. Nonetheless, she's hanging off of cars, she's in homes, she's on drapes, and there's reminders of her everywhere. She runs to the soul and the heart of the people.
If I can add that devotion to Mary means that Catholicism is a religion of reality, because when we say God came among his people, he came in the flesh, and he gained his flesh from the Virgin Mary. So when we look at the Virgin Mary, we can say, God is in heaven, that's true, but God came down to earth, and God was entrusted to this woman, and I entrust myself to her because I want her to protect me just as she protected the infant Christ. It's one of the greatest things that God has done in the history of the Church, because Mary is the guarantee of orthodoxy and realism and faith, even for those, as you say, don't go to church, but they are very devotional to Mary.
No doubt there are some non-Catholics tuning in, and they are wondering, now wait a minute, why are you talking about a statue of the Virgin Mary when you can go right to Jesus? Why are you spending so much time here? Why is the Pope offering prayer to this figurine?
I think that because of what Father just said, that our religion is incarnate, existential, and therefore the images are sacramentals, not sacraments, sacramentals that lift us up to the contemplation of God. For us Catholics, all of creation is sacramental, but we have certain objects that in a particular way evoke for us the love, the presence of God, the mystery of the incarnation that Father was talking about. And images are one such thing. We grasp reality through the senses. We are not disembodied beings, and that's why we need those aids to our piety. And so that's what I would say. It's about the incarnation.
In a way, I may be overreading this, but I'm intrigued by the fact that Francis is ending with Our Lady in Santiago de Cuba, because the other popes went back to Havana, and they had big events in Havana, and then flew back home from the capital. He, I think, is taking a bit. You could argue that his schedule is, partly dictated by coming here to the United States, but I think this is him. That this is really the reason you go to Cuba. You raise up this devotion. You're at the heart of the people. You're at the heart of the faith. And he would go from Santiago directly here to Washington, D.C. There's that direct connection. Some people might think of this as sort of an afterthought, that the important thing was the politics. I think that's wrong. I think that we see in the very scheduling here what he really considers the most important thing.
And no doubt we will see that unfold before us in just moments. When the Pope visits the Sanctuary of the Virgin of Charity in Santiago, we will take you there momentarily. I have to touch on a few emails. We're getting a lot of tweets in. Send your questions. This is a good time to answer some of them. I see them all streaming in now. We have emails congratulating, thanking us for the coverage from Scotland, Ireland, the United Kingdom, from Trinidad and Tobago, Nigeria. It's amazing, again, the kind of communal family reunion that Mother Angelica has allowed us and that EWTN is able to facilitate through its various organs, shortwave and the internet. We have AM/FM affiliates all over the United States, and of course cable. You can get us in many ways. As Doug Keck is so fond of saying, EWTN is everywhere. So now some people looking at seeing me go, we don't want it to be everywhere, but it is everywhere. When the Pope comes, you get over it. I want to share this question. This is for everybody. at the present time, this comes from Daniel, at the present time in Cuba, are the citizens able to practice their faith openly? Or is this outward sign that we see during the Pope's visit just for show on the part of their government? Also, are there any seminaries that are available for men to study for the priesthood at the present moment, or is that restricted in Cuba? Dan Finneran.
They can practice their faith openly, and there is a seminary. Actually, they just finished construction of a new building for the seminary, no, a new house for the seminary. But they also
But very few numbers, seven guys or something, 13
sure,
guys.
but I mean, they can practice their faith freely, but they also experience harassment from the government, you know.
Well, I thought they could only practice their faith in the confines of the church.
Well, the government allows those processions in preparation for Our Lady of Charity, so it has relaxed a little bit.
On certain feast days and
But we have to
but
remember,
it still harasses Christians.
You have to
know.
remember that the Catholic Church is not allowed to operate schools, hospitals. There's no catechetical radio or television allowed. The publication of Catholic journals is extremely restricted. The ordinary means now in the U.S. to communicate church information through the internet, this is not permitted. It's a complete control mechanism of the communist government on the church. There has been some relaxation, but would we say that we could practice Catholicism freely in the U.S. if we couldn't watch EWTN every day? Of course not. We'd say the government is depriving us of our right. And that really is, you know, the heritage of communism. It's still there.
Robert Roy.
Yeah, I think it's very hard for people living in the United States and in other free societies to appreciate how much communism in a state like this is a religion in and of itself. The Holy Father, of course, has talked about dismissing ideologies, how ideologies are closed ideas. But the communists don't see it that way. They see themselves as the vanguard of humanity and all those slogans we used to hear during the Cold War. So for them, even if there are some openings, even if there's a new seminary building that's been built, they regard the faith itself as a challenge, maybe not a very strong one because they've suppressed it, but in its very nature, it contradicts what they believe is the future of humanity.
That's an interesting insight. And so it really is something quite special then, to see this kind of public expression. Indeed, the people were marveling over the fact that Cardinal Jaime Ortega, the primate in Cuba, he was allowed on national television. There was an interview with him prior to this visit, which was considered a big deal. The church doesn't get this kind of attention or focus. This is not the United States, and you don't have free organs reporting. And so in that sense, it is sort of an extraordinary moment of grace for the people as well, both in their expression and what they can say.
You mentioned free organs. About 20, 25 years ago, there was a big trial of a general. His name was Ochoa. He was accused of drug trafficking. Some people say that it was because he was a leader within the army and they wanted to get rid of him. And I remember watching a documentary about that, and Raúl Castro, saying in front of the assembly, well, it doesn't matter what I say now because what I say is whatever is published in Gramma, the official newspaper of the Communist Party. So even they, I mean, are open about the fact that there is no such thing. And everything is presented the way they. I mean, everything is distorted to their liking. You know?
Do you see any clues in what we have witnessed so far in the way the Holy Father might engage the culture here in the United States, another place he has never visited before, like Cuba? Do we see any clues about how he might proceed?
Well, one thing he spoke about was he came to encounter people, and this culture of encounter, which really means a culture of dialogue, learning one from another. And I think he's going to experience that wonderfully here when he sees the devotion in Washington, New York, and Philadelphia. I also think he comes precisely at a time when we face challenges that he hasn't faced really in Argentina. I mean, we have this Obama administration attempt to force Catholic institutions to distribute and pay for contraceptive and abortion-causing pills. This kind of activity, reprehensible, and I'm sure he's going to speak about religious liberty. I think he's also going to speak about the question of immigration, because that's a big subject in our hemisphere and what it means for the future of the church. And quite frankly, it's very refreshing to see the devotion and fidelity of the Latin American Catholics coming to this country. We need to be open and welcoming to them. This is apart from legal questions concerning immigration law. Now, I'll leave that aside.
Sure.
But the Pope, it's a different world in Cuba than here, but I think he'll bring a similar approach as he wants to learn, but he's also got a message that he's going to challenge us with.
Robert, do you expect he will be as subtle, oblique, as he's been in Cuba when he arrives here in the United States?
Well, I don't envy him because he's not really an English speaker. And when he comes here, he's not going to have that advantage that he had in Cuba, that he could speak, quite directly to people.
Right.
So he was cautious, as we saw in those formal presentations in Cuba. He will probably have to stick very, very closely to his text when he's speaking at Congress,
Right.
in the UN, etc. But I think the place which will be most interesting is when he gets a little bit more off the cuff. And maybe we'll see this in the canonization of Junipero Serra, where you really do engage this immigration question because you're dealing with Hispanics
Right.
and that whole history that exists here in the United States. I myself would like to think that somebody in the Vatican will find some language that will enable him to address what I think are the two biggest challenges. One is this Planned Parenthood horror that has emerged. This has to be spoken about directly and powerfully by the Pope. That this is a country, unlike Europe, people don't realize that abortion is actually more restricted elsewhere. We have an almost free abortion regime right up to the birth of a baby. So in that respect, we're sort of the abortion capital of the world. The other thing is the way that gay marriage has now played into the religious liberty question that Father Murray was just talking about, because it's not simply that, like in Cuba, we have a government that wants to restrict the church so that it can do whatever it wants. There are particular ways in which it's challenging the church in its provision of health care. But on this gay marriage thing, I think he must speak directly and openly about it, because it's the one place where it's very hard to push back. You can kind of push back on bioethical questions, but when the church itself is regarded as a purveyor of hatred, as we often hear, as itself a institution of bias, so that we are almost like the Ku Klux Klan, we're not admitted into polite society, that has to be met forcefully. So we'll see what his people have advised him to do about that.
Father Roberto, what do you imagine we're going to see, and what have you seen here in Cuba that would lead you to prognosticate a bit?
I think we're going to hear him speak about human frailty, brokenness, about Christ being the fullness of humanity, healing our humanity. I don't know if we will hear him speak about specific topics in the political agenda in the U.S. For two reasons, I think. First of all, he's first and foremost Peter, who comes to confirm us in the faith. And so practical aspects are in the domain of on the plate of the local bishops for them to address. And secondly, yes, he will speak about gender ideology, as he has been in the weekly audience, although it's been silenced and censored by the press in America. But I mean, very clearly, as he has, and very clear about abortion. But I mean, I think that he will concentrate on presenting Christ to America. When Pope Benedict went to Seville for the World Meeting of Families, shortly after that he went to Germany, and he gave an interview, a TV interview, to German journalists, and they asked him this question. They said to him, "You went to Seville and you didn't speak about homosexuality, contraception, abortion. Is that because you shunned those topics?" And Pope Benedict said something that I think will apply to Francis. No, I didn't do it because everybody knows where the church stands. But our message is bigger than that.
I don't mean to interrupt, Father, but this is the interior of the shrine of Our Lady of Cobre, Our Lady of Charity in Santiago. This is part of Pope Francis's last full day in Cuba. We take you now there live. You see the papal entourage, some of the bishops stepping out of these lorries and making their way into the shrine. The Holy Father's being given a bouquet, of course, to take to this beloved image of Mary, the Blessed Mother, and one dear to the heart of many of the Cuban people.
And if you see his face, Raymond, you see his face, He looks like a child who is about to have an encounter with his mother. It's beautiful. I mean, he exudes Marian piety, you know, much like John Paul. Benedict was a little more austere in his devotion, I would say. He had great devotion for the Blessed Mother.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think all three of them were in their own right. They combined popular piety with the soundest theology in a way that is remarkable.
And there's the image of Our Lady of Charity, and the Pope is placing his bouquet at the feet of the statue. This image that was found floating in the Bay of Nipe.
He touches the image, as we heard earlier, he'd like to encourage people to do.
It's a tradition to receive graces from the image, you know.
And really, we you know, so many might look in and say, "Oh, you're worshiping images." Well, no, this is a representative of
This
Our
is the
Lady
mother of
and
Jesus.
Mary.
The one Jesus honored, he honored.
Sure.
And you know, for a pope who really learned his faith at the feet of his grandmother, whom he wrote about and talks about regularly, this, of course, has particular resonance. His mother and his grandmother were two figures that loomed large in his spiritual formation, and no doubt taught him a lot of the piety that we're watching unfold now.
And popular piety is very much a very important part of Latin American Catholicism. But I would say that it's not just emotional. It bespeaks a deep understanding of the mystery of the Incarnation. It's not just superficial emotions, but the contemplation of one of the central mysteries of our faith.
Absolutely, and it's the idea of the communion of the saints. The saints gather together with the living. We honor Christ all together and do that in the presence of this image of his mother.
He's having some words here with Monsignor Marini, and there is a formal prayer the Pope will offer here, and it appears that he's about to offer that prayer. Oh, he must have asked Monsignor Marini if they had a chair for him. His leg is giving him a rough time, whether that's sciatica or if it's something he pulled, but...
It was common knowledge when he was Archbishop that he had sciatica.
But did it ever impede his walking? This is the first time I've
For
seen
example,
him sort
for
of
example, at
labor.
one of the synods when he was cardinal, he did not participate because he was back home having his sciatica being treated. So yes.
The Pope praying now before this image of Our Lady of Charity, such a beloved icon to the Cuban people and beyond.
It's curious that the chapel there seems to be empty. It's just him and the entourage. I didn't see any people.
No, there were a
when I
few
was walking.
people. There were a few people there, but very few. It looked like it was
People must be
mostly-
gathered outside.
And his bishops are with him, and the papal party. This is really kind of a personal
Yes. And it's
moment
been a long
of
day.
reflection and
Sure.
prayer.
It's reminiscent of how he likes to go to St. Mary Major Basilica in Rome to pray in front of Our Lady Salus Populus Romano.
We will let you listen to a bit of the music here and the Pope in his meditation at the minor basilica of the Virgin of Charity in Santiago, Cuba. This is EWTN News Live coverage. This is EWTN News live coverage of Pope Francis at the shrine of Our Lady of El Cobre, Our Lady of Charity. Now, in the image, she holds Jesus in one hand and there's a cross in the other. What does that denote?
Well, I think that the incarnation and the passion, you know.
And where was the Blessed Mother in the life of Christ? At his birth, naturally, but she was at the foot of the cross, and she spiritually offered her sons up to God the Father. And
the only human being that was, other than Christ, of course, that was present at the two most fundamental moments in the history of salvation: the incarnation of the eternal Word of God, and the culmination of His work of redemption, His passion and death on the cross.
There were many occasions where once this image, this statue had been erected here, it vanished. There were times where it vanished and then it would reappear. At least that's the legend surrounding it.
yes, and it was originally kept in another place. Then the people got the idea we should move it to this place. And
This basilica was built in the 20s by a family from Cienfuegos, because the Bishop of Santiago at the time was originally from Cienfuegos, which is in the southern part of Cuba. That family, of course, is now part of the exile community.
And I'm thinking of all the people who will be praying simultaneously in Miami at the shrine of Our Lady of Charity of Cobre, where they have a beautiful image, but then below it they have a painting of all the great figures of Cuban Catholicism, including Father Varela, all around the image.
There's a mural,
It's a mural, and it's a beautiful scene.
On September the 8th, the Feast of Our Lady of Charity in Miami, there's a big celebration. This year, and every year, there's a different homilist. This year, Father Rolando Cabrera, who preached, the pastor of St. Catherine of Siena in Miami, did a beautiful job connecting the weaving the history of the image with the history of Cuba and with the lessons to be learned. So beautiful. I think it's in the website of the Archdiocese of Miami, his homily.
One can only imagine what is in the prayer and mind of Pope Francis here before this image. After seeing all he has seen just in the last couple of days, he's encountered both the Castro brothers. He's seen people dragged away, some of these dissidents dragged away. He's seen the exultation, excitement, and joy of the Cuban people. He's walked among them and spent time with them. And I'm sure it is all of those souls that he brings to the Mother of God and to Jesus himself.
We know the Pope is a man of intense prayer. He wakes up every morning at 4 a.m. by his own account and prays and meditates. He's great devotion to the Rosary, great devotion to praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament. This is a lesson that's so valuable for all of us. The Christian life is nothing without prayer. And prayer shouldn't just simply be words we say. They have to be movements of the heart, and that begins in silence. So before the Pope does say the prayer that's beautiful that we'll hear, he prays silently, and he doesn't mind that other people are looking at him. That's something other people need to know. It doesn't matter if you go to church and people look at you praying. In fact, you're doing them a favor, because you're reminding them that they should be praying. And you're reminding them, too, that God sees everything.
And also, I mean, if you cannot kneel because you're
right.
you're in pain, you can still sit or stand, you know. What's important is to be in the presence of the Lord.
Yeah, the beauty of meditation is one of the things that's been lost often in our post-Vatican II church, in which we've encouraged vernacular language and everybody sings, everybody prays. Silence really is where God touches the heart. And it's, you know, our monastic foundations, nuns and monks, they remind us of something that the Pope reminds us of.
This is what the papacy is about confirming us in the faith. And what there's no greater way, I think, for the Pope to confirm us in the faith, than by showing to us by his example the importance of prayer in our life. That the words of the Lord Jesus in chapter 15 of the Gospel of John, "Without me you can do nothing," are true, you know, and therefore we need to go again and again to him in prayer.
The Pope now beginning the formal part, the public prayer, after some moments of reflection and quiet meditation.
Virgen de la Caridad del Cobre, patrona de Cuba.
Our Lady of Charity of El Cobre, patrons of Cuba, Hail Mary, full of grace.
Tú eres la hija amada del Padre,
You are the beloved daughter of the Father,
la Madre de Cristo,
the Mother of Christ, our God,
el templo vivo del Espíritu Santo.
the living temple of the Holy Spirit.
Llevas en tu nombre
You carry in your name, Our Lady of Charity,
la memoria del Dios que es amor.
the memorial of God who is love,
Recuerdo del mandamiento nuevo de Jesús.
a reminder of the new commandment of Jesus,
Amor derramado en nuestro
a
corazón.
memory of the Holy Spirit, love poured out on our hearts, fire of charity sent on Pentecost over the church,
De la plena libertad.
gift of the fullness of freedom of the children of God.
Bendita tú entre las mujeres y bendito el fruto de tu.
Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Has venido a visitar nuestro
You
pueblo
came to visit our people,
y has querido quedarte con nosotros.
and you wish to stay with us
Y Señora de
as Mother and Queen of Cuba
a lo largo de su peregrinaje
through its journey
caminos de la historia.
on the path of history.
Tu nombre y tu imagen están esculpidos en la mente,
Your name and your image are engraved in the minds and in the hearts of all Cubans,
dentro y fuera de la patria,
inside and outside of the fatherland,
de esperanza
as a sign of hope
y centro de comunión fraterna.
and center of fraternal communion.
Santa María, Madre de Dios,
Holy Mary, Mother of God and our Mother,
ruega por nosotros,
pray for us before your Son Jesus Christ.
intercede por nosotros.
Intercede for us with your maternal heart,
Maternal, inundado de la caridad,
filled with the charity of the Spirit.
acrecienta nuestra fe.
Increase our faith,
Viva la esperanza, aumenta y fortalece
strengthen our hope,
el amor.
increase and strengthen in us love.
Para nuestra familia,
Protect our families,
protege a los jóvenes,
protect our youth and our children,
consuela a los
comfort those who are suffering.
sé madre de los fieles,
Be a mother to the faithful
pastores de
and to the shepherds of the church,
modelo y estrella,
model and star of the new evangelization.
madre de la reconciliación.
Mother of reconciliation,
Reúne a tu pueblo,
gather your people throughout the world.
haz de la nación cubana
Make the Cuban nation
hermanos y
a
hermanas,
home of brothers and sisters,
para que este pueblo
so that these people
abra de par en
may
par,
open wide its mind, its heart, its life to Christ,
único Salvador,
the only Savior and Redeemer,
que vive y reina
who lives and reigns with the Father
y el Espíritu
and the Holy Spirit
por los siglos de los siglos.
forever and ever.
This is live EWTN news coverage. Pope Francis in a meditative moment at the shrine of Our Lady of Charity. And he lights a candle, a pair of candles. Now, Father, people often see Catholics lighting candles in churches, and they're mystified as to what's happening there.
Christ said, I am the light of the world, and he said to us, you are the light of the world. So light is a symbol of divine presence. It's also a symbol of prayer rising up to heaven. And that burning of the candle also symbolizes hearts burning with love, as the Emmaus disciples said. Lighting a candle is also a symbol of conquering the darkness of sin. It also seems the permanence of the prayer, that it continues to burn even after we have left the church. So it has many symbolisms.
Quédate con nosotros, Señor.
Stay with us, Lord.
Acompáñanos, aunque no siempre hayamos sabido
Stay with us,
reconocer.
even though we may not have always recognized you.
Nosotros, porque tú eres el camino, la verdad y la vida.
Stay with us because you are the way, the truth, and the life. Stay with our families.
Ilumínalas y sosténlas.
Illuminate them and sustain them in their difficulties.
Nuestros niños y
Stay with our children and our young people.
ellos está la esperanza.
In them is place the hope and the richness of our fatherland.
con los que sufren.
Stay with those who suffer, comfort them and protect them.
Quédate con
Stay
nosotros
with us, Lord.
cuando surge la duda
When doubts arise,
o la dificultad.
when we are tired or face difficulties,
Con tu palabra.
illumine our minds with your word.
Danos con el pan de
Feed us with the bread of life
ofreces en cada
that you offer to us in each Eucharist.
Ayúdanos a sentir el gozo de creer en ti,
Help us to experience the joy of believing in you.
con la comunidad de tus discípulos.
Stay, Lord. Stay with us, Lord, with your disciples, with the community of your disciples. Renew in us the gift of your love.
Danos en la fidelidad,
Encourage us and keep us in faithfulness,
alegría,
so that we may announce to everybody with joy that you are risen from the dead
misión,
and that you have entrusted us the mission to be your witnesses.
que María de la Caridad,
May Mary of the Charity, disciple and missionary,
Madre de todos,
Mother of all,
nos acompañe y proteja.
walk with us and protect us. Amen.
The Pope offered those beautiful flowers, sculpted flowers, and it's a tradition of popes to offer golden roses to the different shrines of Our Lady throughout the world, and Pope Francis is continuing that and has been placed right at the side of the image of Our Lady.
Pope Francis making his way out of this shrine of Our Lady of Charity after a brief prayer, blessing, invoking her blessing on the people, really, the people he's encountered so far. He has this vision of encounter. We have to encounter. We have to listen, experience, touch, talk. And he after that experience, he brings that into the prayer. And he's dramatizing that in a tangible way today.
I find it very interesting that he invoked the Blessed Virgin Mary as Mother of Reconciliation. I don't know if I have ever heard that that form of addressing the Blessed Mother before, but it's very pointed to the reality of the Cuban people. And then he went on to say, gather your people throughout the world, you know. And that's what the Blessed Mother does for Cubans. She's the one who unites them.
There are some children here giving him some gifts, and he's talking with the children. Unfortunately, we can't hear what he's saying.
There may not be a microphone.
Now, there's one there, but it's not. It's apparently not hooked
not
up
working
to. It's not
for
hooked
us,
up to us.
at least, yes.
It's sweet. He's taking the children. He's got touching their faces and blessing them.
And the Pope offers them rosary beads as a gift.
Also interesting that he asked the Blessed Virgin Mary to intercede so that the Cuban nation may become a home of brothers and sisters. Very, very interesting, I think. Also the mention of those who are far away. Your name and your image are engraved in the minds and hearts of all Cubans, within and without. So very much a prayer for the reconciliation of the Cuban people that is so much needed. There is so much suffering, you know, on both sides of the Florida Strait. There is so much suffering, and
this was a call and an inclusion of
yes,
all those people in the whole diaspora, the Cuban diaspora. We have, as is often the case, you people coming in and out of the coverage. They drop in. They've just seen this. Andres Montoya asks the question. I hope you all are well. I'm currently watching. I wanted to know what dissidents meant. Who are they? And thank you, guys.
Well, we don't know entirely because the society is not open, but there are Catholic labor leaders. There are people who are protesting for human rights. There are people who want religious liberty. We know the ladies in white are perhaps the most prominent group. My wife was just telling me last night that they've been arrested for 22 straight weeks on Sundays when they demonstrate in public. So it's a varied group. Different people have different emphases, but they're all seeking that same thing, the kind of thing that we take so much for granted in free societies, and that is that the people have a right to their opinions, they have a right to criticize the government, to talk back to the system, that on a kind of a public level.
Or just to practice their faith and have dominion over their children.
Right, and not to be penalized in your education or your job because you are a believer.
These children are singing for the Pope, but I can't hear it. Let's see. Now, I don't think we're getting any audio. And I'm sorry about that.
This is reminiscent of earlier in the day when he was in Holguín.
There we have it.
There they are.
I come to offer my heart.
And that concluded the little performance. It had a little Caribbean groove there.
It's really beautiful. Suffer the little children to come to me, Christ said. And the Pope shows great love for those children. They love the Pope. I mean, there's the hope of Cuba right there.
Yeah. And one can only imagine what that moment will mean to them in the years to come.
Yes.
You're right, Father. It is very odd that the shrine is not packed with people, that there are so few people in attendance here.
It's as if it were a private visit of the Pope, but
Correct.
I'm sure there are people outside. That's my estimation.
I think I just saw a statue of St. John Baptist de la Salle by the altar.
Yes, on the right-hand
side. I studied with the Christian brothers.
All right,
Very
on the
nice.
right-hand side, and he's got the children next to him in the statue.
You know, whenever I see the Pope with a Marian image, I think that he has a special devotion that he brought back from Germany, actually, when he studied in Germany, to Our Lady, Untie of Knots.
Yes.
So it isn't just a kind of a vague spiritual Mary. It's a lady who actually does something, who unties some of the difficulties that we've gotten ourselves into. And it's worth actually looking at that image because she's being passed a ribbon by angels that's all knotted up, and she's untying them, and then it's coming out smooth on the other side. And that seems to suggest something that he perceives in the Virgin.
Yes.
If you go to the Basilica of Our Lady of Luján, the patroness of Argentina, in the chamber of Our Lady, there's the suqueto that he wore on the solemn inauguration of his pontificate that he sent to be placed at the feet of the Blessed Mother.
The
in
lady,
Luján, in Argentina.
In Argentina.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's that last image of Our Lady of Charity.
He exudes Marian piety.
Before I end our little meeting here, we're getting a lot of emails, one of which raises an interesting point. There was an article actually earlier today that I meant to bring this up earlier. Cuba's santeros, those who practice Santeria, feel slighted by the Pope. And someone here is asking, can you speak about Santeria? Now, according to this Univision poll that was done earlier this year, 13% of Cubans polled named Santeria as their religion, second only to Catholicism, which was 27%. What is this, and how is the Pope engaging it or not?
I'll start and then I'll pass on to Padre, because Santeria, I had experience of it when I was in Manhattan, in Upper Manhattan. Santeria is this very bad mixture of paganism, African religions, and Catholicism, and it basically is a religion based on fear and superstition. Santeros take lots of money from people. They promise to cure them of evil spirits, to help them, they can make money. They force them to do strange things. People would kill chickens, leave them in front of the church. They'd force them to dress in white all the time. They would make them wear medals. It's basically just your typical superstition, but since it has these elements of African, Catholic, and people say, oh, this is an ancient heritage. It's a big superstition. That's my experience.
I mean, it's really a Caribbean, African
it's
hybrid.
an Afro-Cuban
with a Catholic veneer in some cases.
Of course, because there's syncretism in some where, for example, the saints are assimilated to some of the deities.
Right.
Of
Explain what that means.
Afro-Cuban.
So if you go to a Santeria, someone practicing Santeria, and I've been to some of these places, you walk into a home, they've got a little table, and it looks like a little
Saint
shrine.
Barbara, for example.
Yeah, and
that's right.
And you've got Saint Barbara.
Or Our Lady of Charities one day.
Right. So, and they're there, but they're not who they appear to be. These are kind of stand-ins for the deity, God, demon, whatever they're worshiping.
I think Father summarized it perfectly when he said it's a cult of control and fear. That's what it is. And I might add that during the early stages of the Castro regime, it was very much promoted by the government as a way to undermine the Catholic roots of Cuban culture. So much so that the government, for example, would have the babalaos, who are the quote-unquote priests of these cults, to issue annual letras or forecasts of how the year was going to be for Cubans, because the government saw it as a way to undermine the Catholic root of Cuban culture by exalting these Afro-Cuban cults.
Kind of a communist mindset, the old, give people a new opiate to move them along. Before I end tonight's coverage, we're getting another question here. How can people in the United States support the people of Cuba beyond prayer? Is there anything else they can do?
Well, I think we have to act through our own government. We have to ask our own government to be firm with them, and not to just assume that this is a country that has a history of oppression, and we'll just accept it the way it is. Our United States has to be a beacon for human rights in the world, and unfortunately, because of the way that religious liberty is being infringed on here, I think it's difficult to see how, at least with this administration, we're going to have the kinds of affirmations of human rights that we would like to see. Actually, what I hear from people in the diplomatic corps, people who are Catholic and others, is that unfortunately one of the things that the United States is pushing worldwide right now is gay marriage. That those basic human rights, the freedom of the press, freedom of opinion, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, the things that are really fundamental to a society have been pushed aside, and this rather bizarre new right that even trumps apparently religion in our own country is taking its place.
Well, we are going to leave it there for now. I'm sorry to. Oh, you want to add something?
I would say also, from a practical perspective, Catholic Charities has a great deal of good in Cuba, and I think that a substantial share of the collection that the American bishops take for Latin America, a substantial part of that goes to help the church in Cuba.
I did not know that. See, we're all learning something here tonight. That concludes our coverage for today, but join us tomorrow on Tuesday for more of Pope Francis in Cuba and his arrival in the United States, which we've all been looking forward to. We will bring you his Mass from the Shrine of Our Lady of Charity, a meeting with families at Our Lady of the Assumption Cathedral in Santiago, followed by a blessing of the city of Santiago, and then Pope Francis's arrival in the United States. It all begins tomorrow at 7:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to check EWTN.com for the schedule in your area. Stay with us. Don't miss a moment of this papal visit. Our comprehensive coverage of Pope Francis's journey continues on our EWTN Facebook page, and for the latest updates, you can follow me on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo. On behalf of Robert Royal, Father Gerald Murray, Father Roberto Cid, and the entire staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. We'll see you tomorrow, but before we go, I want to throw it to Doug Keck and Janet Bankovic in Philadelphia for a preview of the World Meeting with Families Congress. Doug?
Thanks, Raymond, for that great coverage, of course, of the Holy Father's blessing of the city of Elgin earlier this afternoon. And, of course, for the Pope's very moving prayer to the Virgin of Caridad. I'm here, Doug Keck, in Pennsylvania at the Convention Center for the World Meeting of Families with my lovely co-host, Janet Bankovic, and we've been watching some of the papal coverage there. You had a couple of quotes from the Holy Father about the family you wanted to read.
Yes, you know, Doug, it's important to remember that our Holy Father continues to affirm the family as that basic cell of society, the union of one man and one woman through the sacrament of matrimony, and the union that is meant to last a lifetime. And he talks with us about the complementarity that man and woman brings to the institution of marriage and to family life in general. He says complementarity will take many forms as each man and woman brings his or her distinctive contributions to their marriage and to the formation of their children, his or her personal richness, personal charisma. And I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful reality for us to keep in mind as we approach marriage in this 21st century. He makes this statement as well. Children have a right, and I love the use of his word right there. Children have a right to grow up in a family with a father and a mother, capable of creating a suitable environment for the child's development and emotional maturity. There, he's telling us that without a mother and a father in a home that creates a suitable environment, our children will miss something. So for their developmental and emotional maturity, this is what family life is meant to be about.
And we're living in such a unisex society, and there's so much an attack on the family and the nature of what the family is. Another quote that I picked out was, "What is at stake is the identity and survival of the family, father, mother, and children." That's what the World Meeting of Family is all about. That's what our Holy Father's talking about. We're going to have complete coverage throughout the week. We've got some great guests we're going to have on tomorrow. We hope to have Bishop Barron on, who's also the keynote speaker, and several others. You can go to our website, get all that information, but we're going to let everybody go right now. Make sure you join us tomorrow, Tuesday the 22nd, for continuing coverage of the papal visit to Cuba. That'll be Raymond and his team, including his departure from Havana and his arrival at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. He's coming to the States. We're here in Philadelphia at the Pennsylvania Convention Center throughout the week. Join us for all the exciting special events planned for the World Meeting of Families, wonderful talks, breakout sessions. It's a day you won't want to miss. We'll bring you the World Meeting of Families opening ceremony and the first keynote session, with the speaker being the Most Reverend Robert Barron, newly ordained auxiliary bishop, good friend of ours of Los Angeles. Meanwhile, remember, for all the late-breaking information, check out EWTN's television and radio. Check out our app, very important, mobile app, EWTN's Facebook page for the latest programming information. Check out EWTN's website, EWTN.com. You can always tweet us at hashtag EWTNWMF for World Meeting of Families. And, of course, I'm Doug Keck, and for my co-host, Janet Bankovic, we wish you a very good evening. We'll see you tomorrow.